Demons don't chase you without reason. You're a light or dark chosen one. Have you ever wondered why your life feels like it's under siege, even when you're trying to do everything right? Why, when you finally start to evolve, grow and step into your truth, something unseen seems to rise against you? It's not your imagination. It's not just bad luck. It's not even karma in the way most people understand it. Demons don't chase you without reason. You're not being attacked because you're weak. You're being hunted because you're powerful. Because there's something in you, light or dark, that threatens the very constructs of spiritual stagnation. You are a chosen one. And whether you walk in light or shadow, your energy disrupts the false order of things. That's why they come for you. From the moment you were born, the vibration of your soul began disrupting the frequencies around you. Maybe you were the black sheep, the one who never quite fit in, the one who felt too much, knew too much, or asked questions others were too afraid to ask. Maybe you were the child who sensed what others couldn't see, felt the heaviness in rooms, the lies behind the smiles, the pain hidden in silence. And as you grew, so did your awareness. You began to realize that this world isn't just physical. It's a battlefield of energy, of frequency, of unseen forces constantly moving through people, thoughts, emotions, and choices. And you were born into that war with a role that not even you fully understood yet.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Here's the truth most people will never tell you. The more powerful your soul, the more resistance you will face. Because your essence is disruptive. If you carry light, your presence exposes darkness not by attacking it, but simply by existing. And if you carry sacred darkness, your energy dismantles the shallow, performative light that masks deep corruption. Either way, you are a threat, and that threat doesn't go unnoticed. The moment you begin to wake up to who you really are, you activate a spiritual ripple that alerts forces beyond the veil. Some of them want to help you rise. Others want to keep you asleep. And the ones that want you asleep, they'll come for everything: your mind, your emotions, your dreams, your relationships. Not because you're cursed, but because you're dangerous to the illusion. And that's why demons chase you, not because you're broken, but because you're becoming whole. Darkness doesn't waste its energy on souls that pose no risk to the system. It targets the ones who carry codes of liberation, of transformation, of rebellion against the spiritual status quo. And those codes don't always come wrapped in white robes and angelic vibes. Sometimes they come in the form of deep rage, sacred rebellion, truths that cut like knives, and energy that cannot be tamed. You don't have to be soft to be divine. You don't have to be pure to be chosen. Sometimes your divinity is found in your scars. Sometimes your power is forged in chaos, in pain, in the moments you thought were breaking you, but were actually initiating you. So let's talk about those moments. The nights you couldn't sleep because something unseen was pressing on your chest. The toxic patterns you couldn't escape, no matter how much you tried to heal. The people who turned on you without explanation. The relationships that drained your life force. The relentless voices in your head telling you that you're not enough, that it's too late, that you'll never be free. What if I told you that those weren't coincidences? What if I told you that the spiritual warfare you've been feeling is confirmation of your mission? That the deeper you go into your awakening, the more the shadows will try to pull you back, not because you're failing, but because you're ascending. You see, the chosen ones are not chosen because they're perfect. They're chosen because they carry the capacity to hold both extremes, light and darkness, without losing their center. That's why your journey has been so intense. You weren't born into comfort. You were born into pressure. Because pressure creates diamonds. And you whether you realize it or not, are a diamond soul cut by pain, refined by fire, and destined to pierce through illusion. You might not feel like it yet. You might still be in survival mode. You might still be questioning your worth, your path, your sanity. But deep down, beneath all the noise you've always known. That's why you're still here. Let me ask you something. Why do you think your pain has been so specific, so intricate, so tailored to your deepest fears? Why do you think the attacks seem to hit at your most vulnerable points, as if something understands your blueprint better than you do? Because they do. The shadows that chase you aren't random. They study you. They know your potential. They know what you're here to dismantle. And they fear the moment you remember. So they try to break you before you rise. They try to exhaust you before you activate. They try to isolate you before you connect with those who carry similar codes. But here's the twist they never saw coming. Every battle you've faced has been sharpening you. Every failure has been refining your discernment. Every heartbreak has been expanding your capacity to love without illusion. Every betrayal has been teaching you to trust your own energy above all else. And now, the game is shifting. Because you're not just surviving the attacks anymore. You're reading them. You're learning the language of spiritual warfare. You're beginning to see patterns. And once you see the pattern, you gain power. You stop reacting and you start responding. You stop wondering, why me? And start asking, what's the code here? Because every attack carries a code, a key, a lesson, a piece of your next level. You are not here to be afraid of demons. You are here to understand why they fear you. You were born a portal, why light and darkness both want access to you. There's something that most people never get told. You weren't just born with a soul, you were born as a gateway, a living, breathing portal between realms. That's why your energy has always felt different. Why being around you either uplifts people to new heights or makes them deeply uncomfortable. Because you don't just carry a frequency, you are a frequency. A bridge between the seen and unseen, between human and divine. And when you start to wake up to this truth, everything begins to make sense. The chaos, the attacks, the strange synchronicities, the haunting dreams, the magnetic pull you have on others. You were never just another person in the crowd. You were marked. And both light and darkness know it. When you're a portal, you don't get to live a normal life. You don't get to sleep through your incarnation. Because your energy is a doorway to healing, to awakening, to power. And anything that powerful will attract attention. Now think about it. If your body is a vessel, and your energy is a portal, then what you allow through you affects not just your life, but the lives of everyone you touch. Your thoughts, your emotions, your frequency, it either opens people to the divine or drags them deeper into illusion. That's why you've been under spiritual surveillance since you were a child. Because even before you knew who you were, something else did. Light wants access to you because you are a vessel for transformation. When light flows through you, it activates others. You become a walking reminder of what's possible. You speak, and people remember something ancient. You touch them, and they feel safe without knowing why. Your energy becomes medicine. That's why healers, mystics, artists, and visionaries often walk such brutal paths. Because your soul signed up to be a conduit for divine change. But that much light comes with a cost. Because where there is light, there is shadow. And where there is access, there is infiltration. Darkness wants access to you for the same reason. Because you are a portal. And portals are powerful tools. If darkness can hijack a portal, it can spread distortion, fear, division, addiction, self-doubt. And the most effective way to do that? Through someone else's trust. That's why the most powerful light workers often go through periods of deep darkness. Because the shadows are always testing the thresholds, trying to gain entry, whispering lies into your mind, manipulating your emotions, feeding off your wounds, not because you're cursed, but because you're valuable. You are a spiritual asset. So, If you've ever wondered why your battles feel so personal, so intimate, so psychological, it's because they are. The enemy doesn't waste energy on empty vessels. The war is for the portals, for the gateways, for the ones who can shift timelines simply by healing themselves. You are one of those. And until you understand the weight of that, you'll keep underestimating your power. You'll keep wondering why things feel so heavy, so targeted. But now you know. You were born a portal, and your energy is a battleground. But here's the key. You are not just the portal, you are the guardian of it. You decide what flows through you. You decide what thoughts are allowed to take root, what emotions are allowed to linger, what energies are allowed into your space. That is your sovereignty. That is your weapon. Awareness, discernment, conscious choice. When you start to treat your body, your mind, your aura as a sacred gate, everything changes. You stop entertaining low frequencies. You stop making excuses for toxic patterns. You stop aligning with energies that drain you, because you realize this portal is holy, and I am its guardian. Let me ask you something. What energies have you been unconsciously allowing through your portal? Who or what have you given access to out of habit, fear, loneliness, or distraction? Because every access point is either empowering your light or feeding the darkness. And it's not about shame. It's about clarity. If you're a chosen one, whether light or dark, you have to take radical responsibility for your field. Because everything you allow in, you transmit. That's why your isolation has been sacred. That's why your breakdowns were necessary. They weren't punishments. They were purifications, initiations. Because before you could be trusted with access to others, you had to first reclaim access to yourself. This is the part where power is born, not through rituals or titles or spiritual aesthetics, but through embodiment. Through the moment you decide, this portal is mine. My mind is mine. My body is mine. My energy is mine. And I will not be a doorway for anything that violates my truth. That's when you stop being a passive conduit and become a conscious architect. That's when demons stop chasing you, because they realize they can no longer deceive you. That's when light begins to trust you more, because it knows you won't distort it for ego or attention. And maybe the most important realization is this: you don't have to be only light to be divine. You can be the storm and the stillness. You can carry shadow with sacredness. You can be a dark chosen one and still walk in truth. You don't have to fit the spiritual mold. You just have to be real, because authenticity is power. And when you align your portal with your truth rather than your trauma, you become unshakable. The weight of being chosen, why your struggles are initiations, not punishments. There's a heaviness that comes with being chosen, one that most people will never understand. It's not just the weight of responsibility, it's the weight of remembrance. It's the slow, often painful process of waking up to who and what you really are, in a world that has done everything it can to make you forget. And when you start to remember, when you begin to realize that your life has never been random, that your pain has never been ordinary, and that your path has never been designed for comfort, it hits you. The reason everything's felt so intense, the reason you've suffered in silence, the reason you've been broken and rebuilt more times than you can count, it's not because you're being punished. It's because you're being forged. Being chosen means your life is a series of spiritual initiations, not because the universe is cruel, but because your soul chose a mission too powerful to be built on weak foundations. And that mission, whether it's to heal, to lead, to destroy illusions, or to birth new realities, requires you to become someone who can hold immense energy without collapsing. That's why your story is filled with betrayal, with abandonment, with loss. That's why you've had to question everything: your worth, your sanity, your purpose. Because questioning burns away the false layers, and only truth can carry divine power. You see, when you are chosen, life doesn't let you hide. It pulls you into the fire. It strips away your masks. It takes your ego and grinds it down to dust. It tests your boundaries until you either reinforce them or break. And every time you think you've reached your limit, another layer peels away. It's brutal. It's beautiful. It's sacred. These aren't punishments. They are preparations. Every struggle has been a teacher. Every fall has been a recalibration. Every time you thought you were failing, you were actually being trained. But spiritual training doesn't look like what they sell in books or retreats. It doesn't always come with mantras and incense. Sometimes it looks like crying on the bathroom floor, cursing the sky, screaming into the void. Sometimes it looks like being ghosted by everyone you thought loved you, because their frequency couldn't rise with yours. Sometimes it looks like losing everything you built with your bare hands, only to realize it was built on survival, not sovereignty. These are the moments no one posts about, but they are the most divine, because that's when you meet your soul, not the version you've curated for the world, but the raw, ancient power underneath all the layers you've had to wear just to survive. And here's the thing, not everyone is chosen. Not everyone is sent to disrupt, to awaken, to rebuild. That's why your path can feel so isolating, because you see things others don't. You feel things others deny. You hear the pain in silence. You sense the truth behind smiles. And when you try to speak it, they look at you like you're crazy. But you're not crazy. You're coded. Coded with frequencies that challenge the collective sleep. That's why you can't stay in jobs, relationships, or systems that are out of alignment. That's why your soul rebels against anything fake, because you didn't come here to fit in. You came here to shift the grid. So let me ask you something. What if every struggle has been a test of capacity? What if every loss was preparing you to hold more light or more sacred shadow than you ever imagined? What if your soul chose this exact path, not to punish you, but to prepare you for a mission that can't be taught, only remembered? Because when you're chosen, your life becomes the training ground. You don't just study truth. You live it. You embody it. You bleed it. And that's what gives your words power. Not theory. Embodiment. The world doesn't need more people who can quote spiritual texts. It needs people who have survived their own darkness and still chose love. People who have walked through hell and didn't lose their heart. People who have every reason to be numb, bitter, jaded, but instead transmute their pain into wisdom. That's the true mark of a chosen one. Not perfection, resilience. Not being above the world, but being rooted in it, with eyes wide open and a soul that refuses to forget. And yes, it's exhausting, because being chosen means you're constantly shedding, constantly evolving, constantly being asked to release what no longer fits. You don't get to coast. You don't get to settle, because your soul signed a different contract. One that says, I will not abandon myself, no matter how hard it gets. I will face the shadows within and without. I will rise, even if I have to crawl. I will remember who I am, even if the whole world forgets me. That's the vow. That's the weight. And also the gift. Because on the other side of that weight is something no one can take from you, spiritual authority. Not given by books or titles or followers, but earned through fire, through tears, through truth. And when you walk with that kind of authority, you don't need to convince anyone of who you are. Your presence speaks for you. Your energy becomes the initiation. Others feel you and begin to remember themselves. And that's the real mission. Not just to awaken, but to awaken others through your embodiment. Your energy is the message, how to walk in power without saying a word. When you finally begin to understand who you are, not just on the surface, but in the depths of your being, you realize something profound. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to shout your truth from the rooftops just to be heard. Because once you've embodied your frequency, your energy becomes the message. It speaks before you enter a room. It lingers after you leave. It shifts the atmosphere without a single word. And that is the highest form of power, not control, not force, but presence. Presence cannot be faked. It is cultivated in silence, in solitude, in the trenches of your own transformation. It's what's left after the ego dies again and again. It's the vibration that remains after you've stared into the abyss and chosen to rise instead of retreat. And when you carry that kind of energy, people feel it. Even if they can't explain why, they sense something ancient, something real, something untamed moving through you. They may be drawn to it. They may be repelled by it, but they can't ignore it. That's what happens when you become the embodiment of your truth. You've probably noticed it already, how people look at you a little longer than usual, how strangers open up to you without knowing why, how some avoid you altogether because being near you stirs something they're not ready to face. That's not by accident. That's the ripple effect of embodied energy. It's magnetic by nature, because when you're aligned, when your spirit, mind, and body move as one, you become a tuning fork for truth. And those who are ready will gravitate toward you, not because you're trying to be a leader, but because your vibration feels like home. But this kind of power doesn't come from studying. It doesn't come from memorizing teachings or adopting a spiritual persona. It comes from living the truth when no one's watching, from walking away from what's easy in favor of what's real, from honoring your own cycles even when they don't make sense to the world. It means letting yourself be fully human and fully divine at the same time. And when you do that, when you integrate the sacred and the flawed, you become whole. And wholeness is electric. It heals without trying. It teaches without effort. It commands respect without demanding it. Let me ask you something. What would change in your life if you stopped trying to be seen and instead focused on being aligned? What would shift if you stopped chasing validation and began cultivating presence? Because the truth is, presence is your real platform, not social media, not followers, not external recognition. Your energy is the stage. And when you stand on that stage with authenticity, you won't need to prove your worth. You'll simply become it. This is why the journey of the chosen one is so internal. Because before you can carry the message, you must become the message. And that takes time. It takes humility. It takes falling in love with discipline, with devotion, with the sacred art of becoming. And when you commit to that path, not just once, but every day, you start to notice something miraculous. Life begins to respond to you differently. Opportunities open without force. The right people find you without effort. Doors that were once locked begin to swing open, not because you knocked louder, but because your frequency became the key. This is the final alchemy. When your energy speaks louder than your words, when your life becomes your initiation, when your presence becomes your offering, that is when you've stepped into spiritual maturity. That is when you've transcended the need to chase destiny because you've become it. You walk into a room, and the room shifts. You speak, and truth echoes. You remain silent, and your energy still awakens something ancient in those who have ears to feel. So, if you've been wondering why the words fall short lately, why the teachings don't land the way they used to, maybe it's because you've outgrown the need to speak. Maybe it's because your energy is telling the story now. The story of someone who has been broken and rebuilt, who has faced demons and chosen to rise, who has walked through fire and came out with light in their eyes and shadows at their feet. The story of someone who doesn't need to announce their arrival because their presence is loud enough. You are not here to convince. You are here to remind the world of what it forgot, to remind souls of who they are. And you do that not by preaching, but by being, by staying rooted in your essence, by walking your path with quiet conviction. Because in the end, the most powerful force in the universe is not noise. It's clarity. It's embodiment. It's the kind of energy that says, I know who I am, and I don't need you to understand me for me to be real. That is your gift. That is your legacy. Let your energy speak. Let your life become the message. Let your presence be the transmission. The world is listening.